Welcome to the Surviving Life Today podcast. This is Kelly McFarland, and today we are making these super cute sailor pants. To make these pants, I'll use this Burda pattern. It's number 6573, and it has both full length and shorter pants, but we'll be making the long one. So the first step with making pants is to cut out the pattern. So this is me using a little wheel to cut out all of the pattern pieces. Once I get them cut out, I'll go ahead and iron the material, and then I will pin the pattern pieces to the material in order to cut out the pants. Okay, a brief little pause here while I point out a few things. Since this is kind of a step-by-step DIY, I wanted to show a few tricks here. So right here, I have the plaid matched up so that the squares will actually match. As you can see through the fabric, this square is laid on top of the square on the other side of the fabric, and that makes it so that when you cut out the pattern, the pieces should line up fairly well. So getting the pattern pieces now, I wanted to point out, I'll be putting it all on this board that I have, but with these pattern pieces, as you can see, there's these directional arrows here, trying to pick it up a little bit so you can see it easier. But the arrow right there that is going from the top to the bottom of the screen, that arrow will need to match up with the grain of the material. And so this is something that's kind of important for all of the pattern pieces so that the pants actually fit how they're supposed to. So as you can see, each pattern piece has the little arrow where you need to match it up. And I think there's only about 5 pattern pieces with this one, but each one will have an arrow, except for I think there's one little one like that. Pattern piece 3 doesn't have one. So they have this little guide with it, and you figure out which material size you're using, and then that tells you how to pin the pattern pieces. So using that, that's how you pin it all together and cut out the pants. Okay, so the pattern, the next step after cutting all the pieces out is to transfer all the pattern lines to the right side of the fabric with basting thread. But I actually prefer to mark all of the lines on the other side with a tailor's pencil. So I can link where I got this in the description of the post or in the script, however this is going to work. I have a hard time using any kind of pencils usually because I am left-handed, and I really do like these, and I think actually like the blue is my color of choice for this so that it kind of stands out a little bit. I'll record myself drawing all the little marks and then I will continue. Okay, so looking at the pattern more carefully, I have all of the pieces that I need to be cutting out except for these interfacing pieces. So I'm gonna go and cut out these interfacing pieces, and then once I cut those out, the next step is that I'm gonna do the basting the darts on the back pants pieces, and then I'm going to knot the thread. The reason why you knot the thread on the darts is so that they don't pucker. If you've ever seen darts that, like, when you wear the clothes, it kind of like puckers out on one side, that's because the thread used the machine finish to finish it and not tying it in a knot. So I'm gonna knot the thread, and then I'm going to iron those darts towards the center of the back. And then once I do that part, I'll continue to sewing the pant legs together. So with doing darts, I think the hardest part for me to figure out was, oops, sorry, I had to shake the table, how to pin them correctly. So I have drawn where the darts are onto the material. You should be able to see the blue lines, I believe, hopefully. And so what I do is, where this goes in this direction on the pants, that's where the inseam is, right? So it like curves around your leg into the middle. And then this is the outside of the leg here on this side then. So we're going to do the darts. We're just gonna sew them to begin with towards the inseam. So I'll put the needles on this side. I know that's a weird way to think that through, but it is what it is. Anyway, so what I do is I actually put the tip of the needle where the line is. And then I match up my machine to the line, but also like the line created by where the needle's going through. You see that? And so I fold the dart and hold the dart so that I can see kind of both sides of the blue and how it's touching. And I try to make it so the needle, see how that's not through the blue. So then I'll get the needle to go through the blue evenly on both sides, you see. And so that makes it so that the dart is sewn where the dart is drawn. I don't really know a better way to do this. There might be, there probably is. I tend to do things the hard way before somebody shows me an easier way. But you see it. Otherwise, I have a really hard time with the fold lining up. And so I just really prefer to make sure the fold is lined up by putting the needle through and kind of double checking as I'm going. You see it keeps getting off, and that's because the dart gets smaller as you go. And I just pulled it completely out. Oops. Anyway, so I'm gonna finish pinning. There's 2 darts on this pant leg, and then there's 2 darts on the other pant leg. Those are both the back rear pant legs. And so I will finish pinning them, and then I will sew them and press them towards the center, which is again where the inseam is, where it goes around your leg. And then I will move on to the next step. I just remembered, I also want to say, at the end of the dart, I put the needle going the wrong way, okay? And then I always sew the dart going from this side to the middle, because when you get to the middle part right here, you actually don't do the backtrack with the sewing machine in order to lock the stitch. Instead, you pull a long tail of thread and you tie it in a knot. And so you'll see me do that on the time lapse. When you start at the top, you can lock it into place. So you just go backwards to lock it, right? But then when you get to the bottom, okay, so two things I wanted to say. When you get to the bottom, you want to go 1 or 2 stitches past the end. So you just kind of put it in line with the material. Right, let me just go. Okay, and then let me adjust this way and get my long tail here. There we go. Okay, and so sorry, that was loud. Anyway, so you can see I've got the one here. This is the second one. You see that one matched up real nice. Perfection. Love it. Anyway, trying to get this on the camera. Okay, I believe that's lined up. Anyway, you have your 2 ends. You see how it's loose. You can pull it till it's just tight, but you don't want to pull it too tight. And then you just do these crossover knots, and you don't pull tight. Do not make that material pucker. If you make the material pucker, then your darts look puckered on the other side. That was what I was trying to say earlier, right? So I just tied it. I tied the knot tight, but it's not tight this way on the thread. And then you cut just a short tail here. And then when you flip it the other way around, you see your darts lay flat. And then once I press them towards the middle, they'll be even better. But both darts are flat, and I am very happy with the results. So I will move on to the next one. Okay, so now that I've got the darts sewn, I am pressing them towards the middle of the pant leg. So as you can see, what I do is I kind of make sure this bottom spot that where it puckers is flat as anything. And then as I'm ironing, I pull towards the middle with the material, and that helps all of the darts to just lay really flat. And the whole idea here is that you want the material to lay flat even though you have sewn these darts in, which is gathering it together, so that when you wear the material, it will be flat. And as you can see here, I turned over the pants and I lay it flat, and you don't see any puckering, and so that's pretty perfect. Lay front pant pieces right sides together with back pant pieces, based inside leg seams, or seam number 3, and stitch. So the front pieces right side together with the back pieces, and then we do the inside of the legs. Okie doke, I am on it. So we have a 5/8 inch inseam, which just goes to that line right there. And then when you go backwards, what you're doing is you're locking the thread in place. Okay. Now we are on
the invisible zipper. So we do need to, I need to press open all the leg pieces and then open the zipper, pin face down on the seam allowance at one edge of the opening. The teeth of the zipper must lie exactly on the marked opening edges. Stitch the zipper to the special presser foot close to the zipper, and then switch it to the zipper at the other side. Okay, so hopefully I can understand these directions, but looks like in the picture here, the first step is doing this piece of the zipper, and as you can see, it's face down on the material. Then you flip the zipper to the other side and sew it to the other side of the material, and then you flip the zipper kind of like back around itself and sew it into place. So we will try. Okay, so pressing the seam open. Right here I have both my sides together, and see how you just open it like that? And then we're gonna press that. Okay, so the first step to the invisible zipper is that you want to unzip the zipper. You want your pants, you want to find the correct place to put the zipper, which is in the middle of the back. So the darts are ironed towards the middle, so this is the middle of the back. Now the zipper is going to be an invisible zipper, so that means you will attach it to the material here, and then you're going to actually fold it over and sew again to hide the zipper behind the material. So the first thing I'm going to do is pin it in place here, and take it all the way to the bottom. Like that. So that my seam works right. That was the one thing that I messed up on the last time I did this. So I'm going to pin it and sew it, and then I'll stop the time lapse and I'll come back about the next side. Okay, so the zipper is sewn in, but I sewed it backwards like I said, so that when you flip over the hem to sew the seam, the zipper will then turn invisible. So what it means with the invisible zipper is that basically when the zipper is in place and everything is sewn as it should be, you're only going to see the teeth of the zipper like that. If that is in focus, it'll be like that. Okay, but we're only on step one. So then the other side is the other side of the pants, which is this. The darts are facing the middle, right? So we know that's right. The zipper in the end will be like this, right? But we want it to just attach to the side like this. Right? So that it's invisible. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that the two sides are lined up really well, and then I match the zipper sides at the top very well. Right? You can see how, hopefully you can see that. The material on the pants, I guess I can fold this. Oh no, I can't, I guess. So there's the material on the pants. I'm looking at it at an angle so I can see that it's matched. And then the material for the zipper, you can look at the top zigzag and see that that's matched. Okay, so pin it starting exactly there. then I'm going to pin the whole thing to this side of the pants and sew it on a time lapse. Okay, so the zipper is attached on both sides now. Right, so this is the back of the pants, and there's the zipper. And so now I'm bolting it over so that only the teeth are showing. And then I'm going to pin it. And I'm actually going to zip it closed and fold over and pin both sides. And so a U shape around where the zipper is. So the bottom here, I'll go back and forth several times to kind of secure it the way you see it on jeans. But the rest of it, I'm just going to get as close to the teeth as I can. Probably 1/8 from the teeth.
And now that it's sewn, you can see it has that whole piece together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin the rest of the legs together, and then I will sew the inseam. So this is actually going through the middle of the pants. So I'm making sure all of the dots match on the pants, especially where the front and the back of the middle of the legs meet. So like that real very center of the pants that kind of rips on a lot of people. You just really want to make sure that that is kind of an exact match, and then you pin from there. And then once I get all of that pinned, I will sew it and come back.
The zipper is sewn in, and then the pants are sewn together, right? So I don't know if that captures it pretty good, but the zipper, they go like this through the middle. My two seams, oops, there we go. Two seams really well done in the middle right there. And then the front panels are sewn together, and you see they match up really nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to iron all of this flat, and then I will move on to the next step. And while I have you, I'll go ahead and grab this. All right, so the next step is the front waistband goes on to the top of this front piece, but I'm going to go ahead and iron the center first. Okay, so on the instructions, the next step is to seam the outside of the legs and then attach the pockets. But then the seam goes over the pockets, and then you undo the seam. So I'm not going to do it like that. Sorry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pin it from the very bottom up to where the line is for the pockets, and I'll seam it up to there. And then I actually prefer to attach the pockets first, just to be honest. But I'll see how this works. I might seam it up to there and then go around the pockets and then seam it the rest of the way, but I feel like I should attach the pockets first. Anyway, we'll see. So I sewed the pockets into the end of the seam, right? So the legs are seamed all the way up to where the pockets go, and then the pockets are sewn in. What I'm going to ultimately do is sew this last piece of the seam and connect the pocket to it, and then sew around the pocket and sew up around this top part. But first, I'm gonna fold the pockets, just kind of hand press instead of iron. And I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch seam on either side of these, like this, on this one and on the back. I can't do that once the pants are totally sewn together, and I really do prefer the pockets to have that kind of finished piece there. So I'm going to do that, and then I will sew around everything completely, and the pockets and the pants will be together. Okay, so the pants are finished, and I turned them inside in and they fit good, but I do have to finish the waistband, which is this part. You do the middle waistband at the front, and then these are the two sides, and then you pin it to the right side, and then you sew it and create an edge, and then you flip it back around. So I'm going to do all that. So I did just go over all of the pants, and I cut the seam allotment to 1/4 inch. So all of the seam allotment is now like half as much as it was. And so I'm going to go over all of the pants and iron it. Also pointing out my own mistake that I made that I just discovered is that the pockets, I should have only done 1/8 of an inch in on the front and not the back. And so because of that, I have like this little pucker happening on the back of the pockets. And so I'm just going to tear out that top stitch. Okay. And then finally, when I finish ironing and fixing that, the finished product is that this top seam, I'm going to fold it over like 1/8 of an inch, and then fold it down here. And then I'm going to pin it, and then I flip the pants over this way, and I sew it into place you sew the ditch. So you sew it like in that well between the two patches right there. Okay. I'm going to do the hem on the pants. The pants are very long on me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew a hem. I know this is so weird, right? But I sew a hem like this. Then I sew a hem like really long, like that. and then I fold that really long one in half like this, and then attach that, and that creates a hem where the inside matches, right? So that's the basic idea. And so the first step is pinning at 1/4 inch, and then I've got to figure out how much double the length is that I need, and then go from there. Okay.
Okay, so now I have the pants here, and the bottom is pinned on one of the legs to be shorter, but I need to make sure that they match. And so what I do to make sure that they match is first I measure the inseam of the pants, and then I will measure the inseam of the other leg of the pants and make sure the inseams are even. So also when I fold that cuff to pin it, what I do is I match up that line of the seam, so I make sure it's a straight fold, and so not one of the sides of the fold will fall as we stitch the cuff. And then I also measure the outside of the leg, and this is also to make sure that the cuff doesn't fold or doesn't fall when you pin it. And so I measure the outside. Everything I measure twice, but I measure the outside and I make sure that that is exact, and then I sew it. And then I fold the cuff and I make sure it is pinned straight across.
I hand sewed the hook and eye closure. So at the end of the back, this is the back of the pants. It has a hook and eye here, and then the zipper here. It's just easier to zip a zipper if you've got something to close it first before you zip it. So that's why I put that there. And then, oops, sorry, hit the camera. Anyway, that is the back of the pants. And so now I do still need to sew buttons onto the front of the pants. On either side it gets one on the band and then two further down. These are kind of like sailor pants, so that's why. And then this is the other side, and button, button, button.
And that's the last step. As you can see with the buttons on them, these are just the cutest finished pants you have seen in a long time. Wide leg sailor pants, very nice pattern to follow. I highly recommend it. I hope you enjoyed our DIY sew along, and thank you so much for joining me for the Surviving Life Today podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, hype me up, ask any questions you'd like to below, and until next time, I hope that you survive and thrive in all that you do. Take care.